Good evening. The time is 5:03. The Warwick Finance Committee is open. I'd like to start with acceptance of the minutes from the last finance bid package. May I have a motion?
Move favorable action.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. May I have a motion on the minutes for the Finance Committee?
Move favorable action.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Solicitor, you have a statement to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were some inquiries that were received, and we just want to clarify some information for the record pertaining to the bid package backup documentation for PCR 3722. Unfortunately, over the weekend, the large file that was uploaded was unfortunately not able to be fully presented, and as such, it was unable until brought to our attention and timely fixed. And so that has been up throughout the day today. We apologize for that inconvenience. We would like to note for the record that this information is supplementary information that the council provides in an effort to provide a very transparent form of government. It is not required under the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act addresses providing the notification for these meetings, and in that supplementary notification, we satisfy those with the timely publishing in multiple locations of the agendas that you see commonly. In addition, we also had the contents of the actual resolution as well, which had information pertaining to who the potential awardees as well as the amounts to be awarded was also available throughout the weekend as an additional and non-Open Meetings Act required disclosure. So we just want to let everyone know that the information that we tried to present in advance accommodation to all the members of the public was for the most part fulfilled. There was an unfortunate failure to get the full big package up, but that is not an Open Meetings Act issue, and it is able for us to proceed accordingly this evening and take action as the committee and council sees fit.
Thank you, Solicitor. Item number one is bid 2022-392 radio infrastructure improvement. This is found on page one. Welcome Major Lima.
Thanks, sir.
Good evening, Major.
Good evening, Councilman. Major Mike Lima, Warwick Police Department. Police Department is seeking an exception to bid and authorization to expend funds for necessary upgrades and modernization of our current UHF radio infrastructure that controls all police radio traffic in the city. The radio infrastructure has seen minimal improvements since its implementation, and it is now at the point of risking catastrophic failure. Any disruption to the radio system would be dangerous to both public safety and to the citizens of Warwick. Current radio components are all end of life and end of service. In order to keep our radio system operational today, we are utilizing Verizon's copper wireline system for connectivity between radio towers. These lines are outdated, and Verizon is in the process of removing all copper lines from telephone poles. Verizon has not given us a hard date when we would be kicked off of their lines, but they continue to send us letters indicating this is in the very near possibility. At the present time, we are paying Verizon $9,400 a month to use these transmission lines. The cost continues to rise month after month. Our proposed upgrade will save the city approximately $4,500 a month, or nearly $55,000 per year. There are two parts of the radio system that need to be fixed. The first part is the equipment, and the second part is the transmission of the radio traffic between the sites. The proposed upgrade to the radio infrastructure includes replacing 100% of the old infrastructure components with the most current, highest rated public safety grade Motorola G-Series repeaters, receivers, and comparators. This includes replacing existing transmitters and receivers at all 6 tower sites, replacing the connection between the sites which are currently on Verizon's end-of-life analog network, replacing it with city-owned redundant microwave links, effectively upgrading the system to operate on the digital IP site connectivity, which will increase reliability and system uptime. The police dispatch consoles will be replaced with an AvTech system, which will replace the end-of-life Motorola MCC 5500 system. By upgrading the radio infrastructure, the PD will have the ability to facilitate digital and encrypted radio channels in the future. The police department is requesting this upgrade be awarded to Cyber Communications located at 90 Colorado Ave in Warwick. Cybercom is a sole source vendor for all Motorola equipment in the state of Rhode Island. This is the best possible time to update and upgrade this radio infrastructure because American Rescue Plan Act funding is available for the specific type of project. The cost of this project is $1,183,182.84. If approved, funding would be allocated from budget code 25-799.
Thank you, Major. And I also want to say thank you to you, the chief, and to Director Carlucci for working together and keeping us informed on this modification and this change. Any questions for members of the committee? Councilman Gebhardt.
No questions. I'll just say thanks to the director Carlucci for running through this today. So I think we're anticipating this, maybe not in an exact form, but we talked about this during budget time in terms of broadband upgrades and radio as a component of it. So this is good, moving us towards the future. Seems like a good use of ARPA funds, and the director was highlighting some of the operating cost efficiencies once we're moved over to this new system. So yeah, I'm good with this so far. What would the timeline be in terms of implementation?
We're probably about 6 to 8 months. It takes them about 20 weeks right now to actually get the equipment in. Then Cybercom takes about 3 weeks. They actually set up the whole infrastructure at their facility on Colorado Ave, make sure everything's running properly, and then it's about 2 to 3 weeks to install it after that.
And I didn't see any line item in here in terms of project management, but I'm assuming that Cybercom's going to manage the rollout.
Correct.
Okay. I'm good.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions or comments from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Major, so is it my understanding that this $1,183,000, is that going to be over a 2-year period?
Correct. About 800,000 this fiscal year and 400,000 in next fiscal year.
Okay, and that's all 100% opera money.
Correct.
On page 3, at least of our paperwork, it said that the police and fire right now, it sounds to me as though they're kind of tied into one system, and you say that this product has numerous issues resulting in phone line failures. It is best practice not to tie a police radio and phone system together with the same provider. A loss in communication would result in both systems going down. So let's tell us the hypothetical. What happens if something like that were to occur? Both systems goes down.
If we were on the same provider, which is what we're trying to avoid, that would be if we went to like a Cox that was able to do both, which we don't know if they could. But if we were with Cox, who we have our phone lines with right now, if our radio was tied into them and the whole system went down, then correct, we would have really no communications at that point. Our cars are capable without a radio system infrastructure in place to communicate between each other at a distance. Our portable radios would really not work. I won't say at all, but they wouldn't really work unless they were in close proximity to one another. And our only other option at that point would have to probably switch over to an 800 system temporarily, which wouldn't be very beneficial long term.
So it's very conceivable that if both of those communication systems went down and let's say the fire department was on the scene of a fire and required police assistance for whatever reason, certainly could be a problem getting some police officers on site if they needed it.
I would say yes.
In your breakdown, and by the way, thank you for a real good explanation on why you're looking for $1.2 million. These are, for me, these are the type of things I like to see, as opposed to, this is what it is, this is what it costs. Thank you very much. You've done a really good job in explaining this. Quite honestly, some of the technical stuff I would have to call Phil and get an explanation on, because some of it I don't have a clue on what the technical data is.
Me too.
But, you gave us a good breakdown of where the $1,183,000 is going for. The question that I have, and I think I know the answer, but I need to hear it from you. Number 6, it says budgetary console furniture, associated equipment and installation. So budgetary console furniture, I'm assuming that's not like your living room set or kitchen table or that sort of thing, right?
Correct.
What is that budgetary console furniture?
I'm going to have to ask the director to step in on this
So
one.
you're confused with it as well.
Actually, since this radio equipment will be switched out, it's just form factor. It's the technology integrated into the consoles and everything. So when we were at Cybercom, they were explaining to us that this is kind of an integrated package, whereas if you were to look at it today, you would notice they're just desks. Some of them have their phones hooked up with a little brace underneath it to get at the right angle.
Okay.
We're trying to do away with that.
Okay. Major, assuming that when all of this is completed 2 years down the road, are there any reoccurring costs that we could expect to see other than, some tune-ups, on the infrastructure? I mean, whether we do this or we don't do this, there's tune-ups that are going to be required. So other than that, is there any other expenses, reoccurring expenses that we can expect to see other than your maintenance costs?
Yes, there are. So right now, one of our towers is actually on top of Aldridge Junior High School. That building, we don't know what's going to happen to it, but we have to plan that building is not going to be there. So we were able to secure a spot on the top of the tower on Venturi Ave. With that comes a fee. It's, I believe it was $1,125 a month to be able to have that location on that tower. So that's a reoccurring fee month after month. For the first 3 years of this project, right now there's no other maintenance costs. After years 3, we would have to get a maintenance contract per se with Cybercom, and that would cover the equipment if anything were to happen to it, to break, to be repaired, just like we have maintenance contracts for our other portable radios or our laptops, things like that.
Are we paying a fee for the tower that's there now?
No, because we're not on that tower.
We're not on that tower.
Right now, we're not.
Okay. And you said that fee is $1,125 a month?
Correct. Because the fee that we're paying now is the copper line fee, and that's $9,400 a month.
$9,400 a month.
Yes, that's what we pay now.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Answers my questions.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the council? Questions, comments, members of the public? Questions, comments, members of the public? Thank you. Item number 2, bid number 2 is 2022-310, purchase of a paratransit van, found on page 17. Good evening, Director Underwood.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. So we had gone out to bid for a paratransit bus, 12-passenger plus 2 wheelchair positions. As you can see, the bids were quite broad in scope. They went from $68,886 to $114,346. My recommendation is Matthews Buses at the $68,886 mark. This would be paid for by a Rhode Island state grant. It comes through the Office of Healthy Aging. The city would be responsible for paying up front, and then we would be reimbursed by the state for this purchase. It would come from Code 47799, our capital expenditures.
Thank you. So to reiterate, Director, you said that we would pay the upfront costs, but we already got approved for the grant. They would reimburse us the costs.
That's correct, Councilman Yin, yes.
The full cost, is it because this vehicle falls within the parameter?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Questions, comments, members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Director, did I just hear you say that there would be no matching requirements from the city?
There's a question of like $4,800 that the city is willing to match, but of that total amount, it would be maximum like $4,800, somewhere in that neighborhood.
What do you mean there's a question?
The budget was, last year, was put in two line items. So at this moment, it looks like there's $73,000 in that line item. A small portion of that grant was actually supposed to go to another purpose. Finance Director Schaefer is working on that right now, and I'm not quite sure, to be honest, what the result was.
So there's very little information provided to us in our book on this. What's the anticipated delivery time for this vehicle?
180 days is what they've given us.
180 days?
Yep.
And you have one of these vans now?
We do. We have two of that particular type of van. The other two that we have are 14 plus 2? Sorry, 16 plus 2. The plus 2 being the wheelchair positions.
Oh, sorry, they have what?
16 passenger, excuse me, plus 2 wheelchair positions.
Okay.
So we have 2 of those, and we have 2 of the 14 plus 2.
And has there ever been a time when you've had to have 3?
Ultimately, we need to have at least 5 functioning buses. So what we're trying to do is replace them as we go along. We have 2 that are quite old and should be replaced, but we've never had a program where we were replacing them when we should. So we're just right now trying to replace them as we can.
So again, has there ever been a time when you've had 3? I know you said you need 5. Has there ever been a time when you've had 3?
Bob, do you want to? I'll let our planning.
No, we've had.
If you wouldn't mind, would you mind identifying yourself? Thank you for the record.
Bob Smith, Transportation Planner. We've had 2 12-passenger, 2 wheelchair position buses in the past. This will be the 3rd one. They've suited our needs very well. They've filled the gaps when we needed them. We don't always run a full bus, so these do accommodate what we need.
So the answer is, to your knowledge, you've never had 3?
We've never had 3
At one time.
at one time.
Okay. And why do you think, what's the rationale or reasoning for saying that you need 5?
Well, we've at one point in time we had 6 buses available. Right with the pandemic and the COVID issues in the past 2 years, we've scaled back quite a bit. We're still in a rebuilding process. Eventually, we will need all 6 buses on the road. That'll give us 1 spare to, in case buses go in for PMs or we have any service that has to be done on the buses.
So now I'm confused. I thought you just said that you've never had 3 a minute ago, and now you're just saying you've had 6 at one time?
We've had 6 total buses at one time.
Total.
Which
You
is-
just
which
said to
was-
me a few minutes ago, you've never had 3.
Originally, when I came on board, we had all 16, we had 16 passenger buses. Over the course of time, they were, 2 of the buses were replaced with 12 passenger buses. They've served us well, and the addition of 1 more will probably also serve us well. We'll basically have 3 12-passenger buses with 2 wheelchair positions, and we'll have 3 16-passenger buses along with that, with the inclusion of this bus.
And, all right, so not only have you had 3 at one time, you had 6. Okay, so now I understand it. How many of our citizens do use this transportation?
Well, like I said, we're in the middle of rebuilding the program. Prior to COVID in 2020, we had approximately 600 active citizens that use the buses on a consistent basis. Right now, we're probably about 200, and that's increasing by the month. So we are on an upscale. We are moving in the right direction. Hopefully, once we get settled back and people's confidence come back into, to use our programs and use the buses, we'll get back up to those numbers before.
Mm-hmm. And this service, that is something that's provided at no charge to the citizens?
It's a nominal charge. It's 50 cents per trip. So in other words, a round trip would cost $1.
Okay. What's the year of the 2 that you have now?
The two 12 passengers, they're 2014s.
Okay. They're in good shape?
The fleet's in very good shape. The shelf life on these buses are about 10 years. We stretch them out a little farther than that because we don't use them as hard as, say, Ripta does in their program. So right now we have 1 bus that's already in its 10th year, and we'll have 3 more buses that'll be in their 9th year going forward. So in order to keep the fleet up to a maintained level, that's why we're looking for this bus now. The other thing to consider is that the next time we go out for bid with the variation in the cost of this bus, if we have a possibility to trade in, if we have buses that have trade-in value, it may be a consideration for lower bid in the future.
Plus, like you said earlier, the last couple of years, these buses have had minimal use at best, right?
Due to COVID, yes.
Probably sometime during that time, they weren't being utilized at all.
They have been down, but it's just due to the
Sure.
COVID issues.
But that also extends their life a little bit as well. I'm confused on the results of the bids. So you've listed there 4 different vendors, Matthew Brothers being the lowest price. But in warranties, I don't know if it's just coincidence or what, but in the warranties, you list the warranties as Note 1 for Creative, Note 2 for Brown, Note 3 for Datco, and Note 4 for Matthews. Is that just coincidence that it happened to be 1, 2, 3, 4? Or do all 4 of those notes apply to all 4 of the bidders?
I think they were compatible, weren't they?
My understanding is that they were quite compatible. The only one that was different was the Creative bus that was charging extra for a 100,000 mile warranty, but to my understanding, they were all, the chassis warranty was for 3 years or 36,000 miles, and the powertrain 5 years or 60,000 miles.
So Matthews Bus, what we're going to get would be the 5-year, 60,000 on the powertrain,
Correct.
and 3 years 36,000 on the chassis.
Correct. The only one, like I said, that was different was the Creative Bus, who put in an option for a 5-year, 500,000, or I'm sorry, 100,000 mile, but there was also a charge for that, and that was also the $114,000 bid.
That was on DATCO, giving the bumper-to-bumper standard warranty plus the 5 years. That was only DATCO that was offering that,
Yes, I believe so.
and they were $40,000 more.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, 70% more. Okay, those are my questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I do have one more. Sorry.
Nope, that's it. No, I'm only kidding. Go ahead, Councilman.
So this price, this is a guaranteed price. If this is approved tonight, these are the numbers they're going to charge you. They're not going to come back and say, well, you know what, 2 days ago or 2 hours ago, the price went up. This is a guaranteed number.
I spoke with Doug Gifford, the representative, the sales rep for Matthews, and there was a 30-day limit on that, and we would just be getting under the wire. I think April 6th would be the 30 days.
April 6th to be the 30 days?
I believe so, if I'm not mistaken. It was,
Have you or anyone else made any contact with them in the past several days to find out if they were going to hold that number? You
Yes,
never know
he
what's
said that
gonna
he
happen
would.
here.
Yeah, he said he would hold it for this meeting. I explained to him that we had this meeting tonight, and he was okay with holding it for this.
So if this is approved this evening and you call tomorrow or send an email tonight, that number is going to be locked in.
Yes, Councilman.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Any questions or comments from members of the public? Questions or comments from members of the public? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is the last item that falls within the threshold. I will now move it to ask the committee, the council, then the public, if there is a bid they would like to discuss. One in particular. I'd like to begin it here with the committee. I'd like to, pardon me, I'll get the numbers. I'd like to discuss bid 2022-189 heating oil for Randall Holden. That is found on page 70. And I would also like to discuss bid 2022-391, repairs to fire utility 2. That is found on page 84. Are there any items members of the committee would like to discuss? Thank you. Members of the council, Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you. Item 2022-344, found on page 51. Item 2022-389, found on page 78. Item 2022-349, found on page 81.
I'm sorry, just to back up to the last one. You requested 2022-349?
Yes.
All right, so
Purchase
that's
Skyjack.
page 81?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had to verify.
okay.
Please continue where you left off.
And item 2022-397, found on page 96.
Thank you. Are there any other items on the bid package members of the council would like to discuss? Are there any items on the bid package members of the public would like to discuss?
60, 2022, 339, promotional exams.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Pardon me?
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Rob Cody, Ward 7.
Thank you. Will that be all?
Yes, that's
Thank
the only one I want to discuss.
Thank you. Are there any other items on the bid package members of the public would like to discuss? Thank you. It makes sense to go in order. So we will start at bid 2022-344, purchase of 60 horsepower marine outboard motor. This is found on page 51 and the cost is $7,200. Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you. Major, how many hours on the engine that you're looking to replace?
I don't have that information.
What's the year of the engine you're looking to replace?
I believe it's original, but what I do know is that it cannot be fixed. We did bring it to Wood Boat and Motor because we were trying to get it fixed, and they said that it's not fixable. Those parts are no longer available for that motor.
Is Wood Boat and Motor a Mercury dealer, an authorized Mercury dealer?
The engine that's on there now is a Yamaha.
Oh, it's a Yamaha?
Yes.
And I know they are a Yamaha dealer.
Yes.
So did you bring it to a certified Mercury repair shop?
No, because it's a Yamaha.
And they said, Wood Boat and Motor, they said that Mercury cannot be repaired?
So the engine that's on our boat now, it's a Yamaha motor.
Oh, okay.
That-
Oh, sorry.
that
Oh,
cannot-
sorry. Okay. So you're looking to replace with the Mercury?
With a
Got it.
Mercury, correct.
Got it. And what year is the boat? You said it was the original engine. What year is the boat?
I'm not 100% sure. I know it's a 15-foot center console boat, but I don't know the year.
I'd be curious to know the year for an engine that can't be repaired, because Wood Boat and Motor said it can't be repaired. I'd be curious to know what the year is, especially when it's stating in here that parts are no longer available.
Correct. And that was right from Wood Boat and Motor.
I understand that, but we don't know what the year of this engine is. It could be a 1960 or it could be a 2010.
Correct.
You know, we don't know.
But at this point, I don't think it matters. It's not repairable, whether it was a 2020 or a 1960 motor. They don't have the parts to fix it. Otherwise, we would have fixed it. That was our intent.
Okay. Can you find out and contact me what the year of that engine is?
Sure thing, sir.
And also, when was it that they looked at this engine?
It was during, I believe, the end of last summer, towards the end of that season.
So has that boat been inoperable as of that time?
Yes. We don't utilize any boats in the winter.
No, I know you don't use it during the winter, but was the boat, was it operable before, winter doesn't kick in, boats don't start coming out of the water till the end of November. So when did this engine die?
Again, I'm not 100% sure. This isn't one of our boats that we use on a weekend basis, like our bigger 30-foot boats. This is a boat that's going to go into the smaller waterways, the small lakes and ponds. So it's trailered. It's not something that they fire up every weekend.
With your position paper, it says this includes not only the motor installation, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to be complete. You're going to trailer the boat over to wooden motor. They're going to pull that old engine off. They're going to put a new engine on, and this is inclusive of everything: cable controls, steering controls, everything else that you need, so you can load that boat back up on the truck, drop it in the water, and go to work.
Correct.
And this money's coming out of asset forfeiture?
Correct.
Okay.
And I just got a text from Bob Hart, who used to run our boat program. He says it's a late 90s boat, but it doesn't have an hour meter. So he's not 100% sure, but it was given to us from the fire department.
Okay, great. So we've determined it's a late 90s, doesn't have an hour meter. Okay. Thank you, Major. I'm all set. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members of the council? Any questions from members of the public on bid 2022-344? Any questions from members of the public? Thank you. Next is bid 2022-339. As I said, we'll go in order. This is found on page 62. This is fire department promotional exams. I would like to reiterate that, Mr. Cody, I would like to reiterate that all questions will come before the chairperson of the committee before directed, and will not be directed directly to the chief.
A question for Mr. Howe. Who are the vendors?
So I'm going to seek, please understand that I'm going to seek as this is completely new to me. Is this the vendors? I know in some of the tests we give, the vendors are not identified, or maybe not the vendors are identified, but the certain type of test is not identified because of the privacy and the concerns. Is that applied to this?
Correct. They're confidential vendors because they try to prevent tampering with the promotional exams. So if one of the people that take an exam knew the vendor,
Yeah.
they potentially could, be given test results.
Thank you.
Well, that's problematic because if you think that the vendor or the participants taking the test would do something untoward to try to contact the vendor, that leads to a host of different questions. But furthermore, can you point to any place in the city charter that allows that a public bid be held confidential so that the people that are paying for it don't know who the bid is? I contacted the Secretary of State and they said that's completely illegal. This is not a sealed bid system. So in a sealed bid system, I can understand bids are presented, they're sealed. Nobody knows what the bid is until the bid is open in public in front of all of the people that bid, all of the vendors. In this case, we don't know who ID number 10 is. And so I would like to know, I have a number of questions for somebody that we're about to give money to that we don't know who it is. And for example, and I'll just use you, Mr. Howe, respectfully, you don't know who the vendors are, correct?
I do not.
So and again, this is hypothetical. I don't want you to take offense to this.
Not at all.
Okay. So if your cousin or your brother-in-law was part of that business, you would have to recuse yourself from bidding on it, right? Because you have a conflict of interest, which is, we've seen this happen before with the city council, that if somebody had a conflict of interest, whether they had a family member or so forth, they have to recuse themselves. So how do we know that there's nobody on the city council that has any relationship to any of these vendors where they would have to recuse themselves?
I think it would be, respectfully, I think the answer would be if the vendor was, it's known, it's an ethics violation if it's unknown. So I'm voting on an unknown, but I do understand what the purpose of the vote is for. And I welcome the solicitor to add any input to that, but that would be my understanding of it. Since because I don't know the vendors, it's an unknown.
Well, what we could find out afterwards, because after this bid is placed and after these exams are administered, then we find out who the vendor is. And at that point, we have no idea. So it begs the question. I've never seen a bid in all the years I've been following city council. I've never seen a confidential bid come up. And it's extremely problematic. Because I looked through all the ordinances, and there is nothing in the ordinances that state, even under conflicts of interest, that this is an open bid process. All these vendors need to be identified. And for a lot of reasons. I'll hold the specific reason. a little later on during the conversation. Let me ask, through the chair, who was the company that provided the last time, who provided the service the last time?
Chief, is that information that you have?
Nope, I can't give that information because that is still an active bid and we still have promotional exams going on with that vendor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
He said that there's still active promotional exams going on, so therefore it's still an active bid and he can't disclose who the vendor is.
So that's really problematic. We don't know who it is. Let me ask you this question. Is it a possibility that this vendor could have ties to the city of Warwick, could have been a former employee or a current employee?
You're asking me to
Well,
speak.
I'm asking the chief through you.
Thank you. That's a hypothetical that I don't feel comfortable having the chief answer, and I certainly don't feel comfortable answering. You're asking a hypothetical. I guess there's 100.
Well, it's really not hypothetical. You got to remember, it's a confidential bid and we don't want to say who it is. So I'm trying to narrow it down. This company, or these three companies, you have ID number 10, number 25, and number 30. You're awarding the bid to ID number 30. That's who you want to award it to. So let's ask the question, what are the companies ID number 10 and number 25? Who are they?
The
That's
chief.
confidential.
It's confidential.
The chief has already answered. Confidential.
Well, I think that's problematic, and there's nowhere in the city charter that allows that. This is a public bid. These are public monies that are being expended. This isn't like, ditch, dot, and hide, guess who it is. You have to disclose it under the law. You have to disclose it under the law. The only reason that I can see that this would be confidential is if there is a conflict of interest. And I don't think that you can move forward on voting for this without disclosing it to the public. It's our money. We need to know. So, because now I don't even know, with every single vendor that's on your bid list today, I can go through and I can go on the Secretary of State's website and the Better Business Bureau website, and I can find out who they are, if there's ever been complaints made against them, and if they have insurance, liability insurance. We can't do this. So we don't know who this vendor is. We don't know if they have liability insurance. We don't know if they're in good standing with the Better Business Bureau. We don't know if they're an employee of the city of Warwick, which happened before with this department. We don't know if they're a former city employee, which section 16.2 of the city charter would specifically stop you from doing that. You would be disqualified under 16.2, conflict of interest. So I don't see what the big secret is, and it's extremely problematic that no one on the city council knows who this person is.
Are you asking me?
Well, I think common sense would beg the question that this should not go forward, because we don't know who the bidder is and we can't ask any questions about it. How can that even be legal? I mean, from the phone calls that I made today, it is completely illegal. That it has to be disclosed. This is a public body. This is a public meeting. This is not a sealed bid process. If this was a sealed bid process, I would not have an issue with it, naturally, until the bids are open. Because when the bids are open and they're open in front of all the vendors that submitted bids, then you have to disclose who it is. And the other question is that it says that the bid is for $20,000, but then when you go to page 62, page 63, 64, they want to award the bid for $25,000. So the bid came before the council at $20,000, but now on page 64, they want to award it for $25,000. What's the extra $5,000?
I'm sorry, page 64 is another bid. Am I?
Page 64 on the PDF. Dated March 22nd, 2022.
Okay.
It says confidential vendor ID 30 and the award of $25,000. If you look at page 61, the bid is in front of the council for $20,000. So how did we go from $20,000 to $25,000 for somebody that we don't even know who it is?
So we'll address that. Solicitor, did you, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chief, with the issues being raised here, is there any impending harm of tabling this for a meeting and allowing us to conduct the full due diligence, both from the legal perspective question that's been raised, as well as working with purchasing to at least clarify the dollar threshold differential?
Not at all.
Thank you.
This bid doesn't expire until the end of June, so we've got plenty of time.
I'm sorry, Bill, did you ask him if there was any legal complications that could come from this? I haven't had a problem hearing.
No problem, sir. The question I posed to the chief was whether a decision needed to be made this evening, and if holding it for another meeting, which we have in 2 weeks, would be appropriate to allow us to make sure that all due diligence, including the items you cited, are addressed.
Okay. So I guess my next question would be, how do we go from 20,000 that's been presented before the council, and then in the last page in the fine print to 25,000, and there's no itemization of where that extra 5,000 comes from?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
So the resolution is correct. My recommendation is incorrect. There's a typo on that. I meant $20,000. I made a typo on my letter. So the resolution for $20,000 is the correct amount we're requesting.
So, thank you, and excuse me one moment, Mr. Cody. Solicitor, so it would be the plan of this committee to hold this item? We can finish discussion, understood.
The committee can take action. It would be my guidance to allow us to, given that there's no impending emergency to address this in the 2 weeks, that my recommendation would be to hold the item and clarify the items that have been raised.
Okay, so we're going to hold it based on looking at the ramifications of a confidential bid, number one, and number two, that they have an error in this where they put it at 25,000. Okay, so I have another question that I want on the record, and I want to ask the chief, and I'm going to come right out with it. Can you say to the council tonight and to the members of the audience that you know for a fact that any of these companies, particularly the ID number 30, that you're recommending the award, that none of the workers, none of the employees, none of the staff have any relationship, either present, past, or with the city of Warwick or with the Warwick Fire Department? Can you tell us that for a fact tonight?
Chief, I'm gonna ask that the chief not answer that, seeing that we're gonna hold it, seeing that they're gonna look into it, the points you brought up, and I'd feel better the chief not answer that until we get the answers for there, and then we can move forward.
So will we be able to get an answer to that at the next meeting when this does come up?
That's the intent. And we are gonna hold it. I plan on putting a motion forward to hold it to the next
And
meeting.
do we have a date with that, Mr. Chairman, when that will be held?
When's
until-
the next meeting? You said 18th?
It'll be the next meeting in April?
Next meeting in April 18th. That's what the proposed to hold it for will be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, can you put a PCR on that, please?
Since discussion was opened, I will open up to members of the council and members of the committee, but I am gonna, one moment, I'm gonna PCR, please. PCR 3922. Thank you. Are there any comments from members of the committee? Thank you. I see Councilman Rick's hand is up. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Chairman. I would briefly just want to state that as to the conflict of interest question that was raised, I think that the best practice for any member of the City Council, if we have any relative or any business association or the like with one of those types of companies that provides those types of services, the safe thing to do would be to simply recuse, regardless of whether that person that we have a connection to or business is the winning bidder or not. Because at least that's how my understanding of this is, and how I've done this in the past, where if my wife works for a certain company and that company bids on contract with the city, then even if that company is not the one selected by the city, I recuse myself from the vote. I recuse myself from the discussion because even if that particular company is not the one that is being selected, then it's still a matter of a competitor of it is being considered instead of that particular company. So even though we may not know which companies did or did not bid, which companies or company was or was not selected, the same logic applies. And so while I think that there may be some other concerns that are valid that have been brought up and need to be investigated before we vote on this, I don't think that the conflict of interest is something that we need to be concerned about simply because we don't know the identity of those particular companies. It's simply a matter of us as individuals making sure to do our due diligence and recuse ourselves if there is a possibility that there might be a conflict of interest, just to be on the safe side.
Hold on one moment, please. Thank you, Councilman Ricks. Are there any other comments from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'd like to comment on both comments from the chief as well as Mr. Cody. I've been on the council, as you know, going on 10 years, and I have never seen a bid come in where the vendors were unidentified or anonymous. I hear what the chief said, that this is to prevent, someone picking up the phone and saying, hey, Mr. Vendor, can you get me the answers? Well, I think there's, some pretty stiff laws and pretty strict penalties that govern that type of activity or behavior, both on the vendor's part as well as whoever was making that phone call, if something like that should occur. That's what was suggested. Not that it did occur, but to prevent that. We have, on occasion, had to refrain from questioning regarding security issues because of the police department. Police department has some safety issues, some security issues, et cetera, that we have to protect. And I concur with that completely. I do have a problem voting on a vendor who I have no idea who it is, who they are, where they come from. I understand and hear the argument that, well, you can't have a conflict of interest if you don't know who the vendor is. I don't want to be put in a position to have to say, well, I didn't recuse because I didn't know who the vendor was. And maybe I find out it's my brother that was the vendor. I don't want to be put in that position, particularly where there's nothing that I see in this that would impact the safety of our city, the safety of our potential firefighters who would be taking these promotional exams, the security of the city, the security of the fire department. I don't see where any of that comes into play. So my position is that I'm going to be really hard pressed to vote for this either way if I don't know who the vendor is. Why don't we just put all vendors, let's make all vendors anonymous so that I can't call them up and find out, well, why is it you got this instead of that? And you all know I do that often. I don't see the rationale for this. And I think Mr. Cody has brought up some pretty strong arguments for having those vendors listed. And I don't see any argument for keeping them private. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And Mr. Cody, I know that you stated you wanted to respond, but if you don't mind, since the statement he made is in response to us finding out what the solicitor can find out, can we wait until the result of the finding? Thank you. Oh, okay, thank you. Oh.
So I just wanted to make a point with Mr. Ricks is, and I understand that your point, but I really don't think that anybody on the council has the time to get on the phone and call every one of their relatives to see if they have any business dealings with any type of entity that issues tests. So to me, that really avoids the point. Even if the council was to say to me that we went into executive session and we know all of the vendors and we have found that we don't have any conflicts of interest, I would still have a problem with that because it's a public meeting, it's a public body, and we need to know, I'm a taxpayer, my money's going there, I want to know where it's going. And to comment on what the chief said, that we actually have a vendor now that is doing this from, I guess, the last budget cycle, and not one person on this city council knows who that money went to. I think that's really, really problematic, right? So this question has never been brought up before. I kind of pay pretty close attention to the docket and to the bid package on a regular basis. I've never seen it, but now we found out that we actually have a vendor that's unnamed working for the city, that taxpayers' dollars are being implemented to, and we don't know who it is. So do we only have one vendor that's not identified, or could there be other vendors in the city of Warwick that we're paying that we don't know who they are? So that brings up another question of, this seems to be, it's like a hidden bid. And to me, it begs the question, well, if we have one hidden bid, is there a possibility that we do have others? So it just raises those questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Are there any other comments from members of the public?
Chairman?
Oh, Councilman, I'm sorry. It's Councilman Sinapi.
No worries. So I haven't been here that long, but I've seen at least well over a handful of bids come in with confidential vendors. And every time it's come up, I've always been told the same thing, that we're allowed to. So I would be curious as to the outcome of this, because if what Mr. Cody is saying is correct, we definitely need to change it going forward. That being said, there are exceptions to those rules in Rhode Island law, so I'm curious whether or not we fall under any of them. But it's not for right now to figure out.
Thank you, Councilman, and the solicitor will have an answer in 2 weeks. So any other comments or questions from the public? Thank you. May I have a motion to hold until April 18th?
Motion to hold.
Second.
I have a motion to hold formerly bid 2022-339, now PCR 39-22, till April 18th. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next, going down on the bid package, excuse me, we're going to go to bid 2022-189, Randall Holden Heating Oil. This is found on page 70. Well, pardon me while I look at my tablet here with all my notes in the bid package. There we go. Hi, Christy.
Good evening.
This was requested by me. If you don't mind, this is, could you just explain the bid, please?
So this bid was awarded, it started January 15th, 2022 for $15,000.
Right.
We've expended $12,543.60. I do have a couple of bills that need to be paid, which I cannot do yet because we have to increase the cap. However, we also need to put oil in this building. It's occupied by city employees, winter months, it gets cold. So we're just asking to increase the contract award to another $20,000 because this bid does not expire until January 15th, 2023.
So that you're thinking forward of the, let's say, possibly October, November, December.
Yes.
Into January. to ensure that the oil is in the building. Is it the intent, if you can't answer this, I completely understand, but is it the intent of the city to stay in Holden, or is there are we going to be evacuating Holden eventually?
That I don't know.
So you're just planning ahead?
I think that the majority of the people in that building might be going to the Sawtooth building when it opens, but there is still a division that will be in there, and we use it for storage. Not that it has to be heated for that, but there is still one division that would be left in the building.
Okay, and we still have requirements such as, maintaining that things don't burst and break, and
Correct.
because we still have a responsibility. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Councilman Gebhardt.
Hi, Christy. Are there any electronic HVAC controls there? Like, is that on a schedule? Are there setbacks? Is that
I know there's different thermostats, but you can't cut off just one portion of the building because of the way the heat runs. It's very old. I think the school was probably built in the 50s, and I believe it's original to the building. So we don't have the luxury of being able to just, segregate a wing of the school and either turn the heat on or off just for that wing. It's kind of all or nothing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Questions from the council? Questions, comment? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you.
Well.
Christy, you say there have been deliveries, plural, in the amount of $12,543.60. When were those deliveries totaling that amount made?
One delivery, excuse me, I believe was January 17th. And then the second delivery was made early February. And there's been 2 deliveries since then.
And 2 deliveries since February?
Yes.
Okay. Because this document that I have here is dated as of March 15th, and as of March 15th, you say there is an additional delivery that was made on March 10th. So there's
Correct.
more than one delivery made since March?
There was another one made March 28th.
March what?
28th.
And how much were those 2 deliveries?
They were both for 1,000 gallons. The first one on March 10th was $3,809.49.
I'm sorry, it was how much?
$3,809.49.
Okay.
And the delivery on the 28th was $4,307.89.
So you're looking to increase this for 15,000, by 15,000, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. No, 20,000.
Okay, you're looking to increase it by 20,000. And you have, what's the balance remaining right now in this account?
In the budget code?
Yes.
I didn't look today. Last week, there was approximately $28,000 left.
28,000 left,
Yes.
and you're looking to increase it by an additional 20,000 now?
The bid does not expire until January 15th, 2023.
And this bid is for more than just this particular building? Or
No, it's only
just for this building?
it's only for Holden.
Okay. So again, I'm trying to run these numbers. So you're looking for $20,000 now. You currently have a balance of $28,000 in the account for a total of $48,000. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. You have $12,543 for deliveries that have been made. And in addition to that, you have another $8,116 that you've received to date.
The $12,000 has already been paid. Those bills have been paid.
They've been paid.
Yes. So what I'm looking to do is increase the cap because I had a cap of $15,000 when this was initially awarded. We've paid out $12,546. I have additional bills now that I have to pay, and the building needed oil. So we're looking for an increase of $20,000 until the expiration of this bid, which is January 14th, 2023.
Excuse me one moment, Councilman, while you, Christie, you said this final bill you have to pay, the one that's due now, is that for the 4,000, was it 4,080 or 4,800?
There's two bills. They total $8,117.38.
Okay, thank you.
With any luck, we won't have to have another delivery made to Holden, but I honestly couldn't say.
And what was the amount again? 8,000?
$8,117.38.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Okay, thank you. So, Christie, I'm still trying to understand these numbers. So the $12,543 has already been paid
Yes.
out of the $15,000
Cap.
cap that you had
Yes.
before. How do you have $28,000 left in that account? If you,
In budget code 66340.
okay, that's what I asked earlier. So this budget code is for more than this particular building.
Right, but this
Got it.
bid doesn't expire until January 14th, 2023. So it's,
Okay, so right now, of the 15,000 that you have for this building, you've paid out the 12,543, leaves you with a balance of 2,457.
right,
And you want to add 8,117 to it
right,
because you have those items to pay,
correct.
which brings you just under 11,000. So you're looking for a cushion of about 4,000 between now and hopefully we'll be out of there in the fall. But if we're not out of there in the fall, then you're going to have to come back to us for more money, right?
It's my job to be prepared for the expenses. So
I'm not-
that's what I'm looking forward.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
all.
not arguing that point. I'm looking down the road. So right now, you'll have a $4,000 cushion between now and say the next 3 or 4 weeks if you need more fuel. That's assuming, and you're going to be okay, assuming we're in the Sawtooth building by the time the heating season kicks up again. If it does not happen that we're there, you're going to have to come back to us for additional monies to heat that building, right?
Right.
Okay. Which is why it's so important for us to get over there so we can stop the bleeding with this building. There's outrageous amounts of money going into, and I understand what you said, Chris, that you can't isolate the building. You don't have all those zones, I would assume, in those buildings. You still have pipes that are going to freeze, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand that. No issues with that. But, you know, we're hemorrhaging in this building with the fuel costs for a minimal amount of people in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And so you're saying, just to sum it up, the cost per month is about $4,800 to $5,000 a month to heat the building.
Well, it's entirely driven on the price of oil too.
Right. Oh, no, I
And right
understand.
now, we're paying a lot more than
$4.80 a
yes,
gallon, right.
We're paying a lot more than we did a
That's
year
right.
ago, so.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for members of the council? Any questions for members of the public? Any questions for members of the public? Thank you. Thank you, Christie. Next on the discussion is bid 2022-349. This is found on page 81. It's a $17,495 expense. Purchase of Skyjack 26-foot electric scissor lift. Councilman Lattisaur.
Councilman Howe, we skipped
No,
number-
that's going to be next,
number
correct?
14. The grinding services.
Yeah, Chairman, we have 2022-388 found on page 78.
Who wanted that? Who wanted that one?
I did.
I thought you requested 2022-349.
Yeah, I've got 388, 349, 397.
Okay, I have no problem. Can we, since, all right, we can go back. So we will do, I apologize, Councilman, I didn't hear that
No, that's fine.
request. Bid 2022-388, grinding services with Northeastern Tree Services for $17,500, found on page 78. We all good? Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you. Christie, when did this grinder go out of service?
I don't specifically know the date. It's been out of service for probably a month or two. They've been looking into getting it fixed. We actually had the company that manufactures the grinder come down and take a look at it. We're waiting for an estimate from them to see what it would cost to repair it. But it's a unique piece of machinery.
Was this grinder down in the fall?
No,
So it's something that just happened?
recently.
You just said in the past month or two?
Yes.
And when did you look into getting that repaired?
The vendor came down a couple of weeks ago. But obviously we've been, once again, picking up yard waste. We've started again. So our piles have grown quite substantially, and we need to alleviate the problem. And this is right now our solution, since we don't have a grinder that we can use.
How much is a new grinder?
Probably at least $1 million.
$1 million for a new grinder?
Yes.
Whoa. Now, when this company in Northeastern Tree Service, when they come in and they do they grind up all this stuff, what happens to the grindings? Is that like the chips that the residents can go and pick up?
Yes, it gets, so they'll put it into windrows, and then we, wait for it to compost. We turn it over, and so it's the same process as what we would do if we were running our own grinder. We just don't have the grinder to do the process.
Sure. And this monies that, or the services that Northeastern Tree Service is going to provide is, I'm assuming that they're delivering a machine there, they're going to do all the grindings, and that's it. Do we have to provide staff to do the actual grindings? This is everything.
That's everything. It's everything. It's an operator. We may have to load it with our loader, which is out at the compost facility anyway, but they are bringing their machine to us. They're not charging us for, delivery or anything like that. It's a week's grinding. So 40 hours. And with any luck, our piles will be 2/3 of the size they are now.
And which is why you're doing this through a 56.6?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm good on that. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Christie.
Thank you, Councilman. Committee? Questions from the council? Questions from the public? Thank you. Councilman Lattiser, bid 2022-349, purchase Skyjack 26-foot electric scissor lift, found on page 81.
Thank you. Christie, so what is this piece of equipment, what is it used for?
So it's a scissor lift. So basically, if we needed to change the light bulbs in this room, we can bring it in and get up. Well, I don't know about this room, but
maybe not.
But we use it. So we're sharing resources essentially as well too, because it would be utilized by the water department if they need to do some sort of inspection on a tower. We use it at the ice rink, for our lights and things, up by the ceiling or the heaters, things we can't reach with regular ladders. You can be used by building maintenance. I know a lot of times the fire department, they need lights changed in their apparatus bays. A ladder doesn't do it. So it can be trailered and brought wherever.
Sure. I'm asking you because I'm familiar with what it is, but there's a lot of people, taxpayers, who have no clue what a scissor lift is or what a Skyjack electric lift is. So I think it would be helpful for the folks that are looking at our agendas and the bid package, et cetera, for us to give a little bit more information on what some of these things are and why you need it and what you use it for, et cetera. Do we have one of these now?
We did, but it has been out of service for probably a year and a half. It's very old. It was at the ice rink, and I want to say probably 15 years ago, at least, the figure skaters had purchased it for the ice rink, but it is dead,
Sure.
basically.
I mean, it's an invaluable piece of equipment. I can see where it's a major advantage for DPW, the fire department, any other things that you use for, because it's an extremely versatile piece of equipment and it's very maneuverable. I would just like to ask, in the future, perhaps maybe a little bit more of an explanation as to what this piece of equipment is, what you need it for, why you need it, what you do with it. I think it'd be very helpful to the taxpayers that, are kind of watching out for these things. That's it, Chair. That's all I have on that one.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the committee? Questions from members of the council? Questions from members of the public? Questions from members of the public? Thank you. Bid 2022-391 repairs the fire utility 2. I requested this in the, it's found on page 84. I can state that there was a request from the department to withdraw this item. And Chrissy, did you just want to state on record the reason?
I heard there was some question last week as to whether or not that this vehicle was a total loss. They tore it down at Tasca. They weren't sure. The appraiser went and looked at it, go back to Tasca today, and it has been deemed a total loss. So we're not obviously going to fix it.
Okay. Thank you. Solicitor, do we,
Chairman?
I'm sorry, one moment, Councilman. Solicitor, do we continue with discussion if it's going to be withdrawn, or do we need a motion?
We would be assigning a PCR. You can conclude the discussion as well.
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee? Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you. So Christie, withdrawing this has saved a lot of questions that I had on this item, but a couple of points I want to make is when you look at these repairs, unlike one we recently had, this shows the labor time that is required, every step of the way on this repair. And in addition to that, it also itemizes it on a backup document where it calls for the body labor 28.4, paint labor 10.5, and 10.5 hours, and it's got the hourly rates. That's important for us when we're making financial decisions with taxpayer dollars. This is the way it should be. And it also begs another question now, where on a previous bid, we had $4,400 worth of labor without a clue on how we got there. This one is telling us body labor, paint labor, $50 an hour. Pretty easy to understand, and certainly just in a position that we can make an informed decision on it. So thank you for this. This is the way they should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the council? Members of the public, any questions from members of the public? Thank you. The final item that was requested, wait a minute.
Mr.
I
Chairman.
apologize. You're right. Yep. If I may have a motion, this is now former bid 2022-391 is now PCR 40-22. And may I have a motion to withdraw per request of the department?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Solicitor? Good go. Thank you. The final item that was requested for discussion is bid 2022-397, labor for engine repair, RS Romeo Sierra 70, Peterbilt of Rhode Island, and that is found on page 96. Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you. Christie, this says the sanitation department has a 2016 Peterbilt vehicle RS 70, which requires a new engine. Did we purchase this vehicle new?
Yes.
I didn't hear what you said.
Yes.
We did. Okay. Is there any warranties on this vehicle?
Usually it's only 5 years. And it's,
5 years?
yeah,
When did we purchase it?
2015.
I'm sorry?
2015.
2015 we purchased it, okay. And how many miles on this vehicle?
That I don't know.
We don't know. I think it's important to know because we're looking to put in a new engine. I think it's important that we know how many miles are on a truck that has a blown engine. Is this for a new engine?
Yes.
Or is this a rebuild?
This is for a new engine. They are replacing the engine.
A new long block engine?
Yes,
And you are looking for $12,950.
correct.
So why does the invoice that we have, which is stamped by our purchasing department, calling for $45,785?
That amount includes the parts, the cores. It includes the shop supplies. The only thing that we're asking for is the labor to put the engine in.
So who's paying for the rest of it?
We are. We have another bid for parts that we will
Okay,
purchase.
that's going to come out of the pots.
Correct.
Okay. And it's showing a shop charge of $500. What are we getting for $500 in shop charges?
That's a typical industry charge. You'll see it on a lot of invoices for repairs. It's usually like, if they have to have brake cleaner and they put oil in and they have, any ancillary items that they use that go along with the replacing the engine.
Yep. I know what it is in the private sector. Anyhow, it's whatever cleaning fluids they need, they need some towels, et cetera, et cetera. This is just for labor to install this engine.
Correct.
Just for labor.
It's $185 an hour.
Yep. $185 an hour, which that's not too shabby. But $500 in shop charges, that just seems to be, that's a lot of fluid, it's a lot of cleaner, and it's a lot of rags.
Councilman,
Clean up. Yes.
if I may, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the bid and it's for the labor and you're speaking of an
No,
item that's not billed that is on the
I
bid.
understand that. I absolutely. What she's looking for is $12,950 for labor.
Yes.
What they are paying is $45,785, and they're paying the difference between the $45,700 and the $12,950 out of their OEM pots. So this entire invoice becomes a topic of discussion, and that's why I'm asking about that $500 and what does it include?
So I respectfully disagree and will be happy to and give you my reasoning. The bid that we are discussing is to pay the labor. That is $12,950. That is the topic of the bid, is for labor. The purchasing director said that the parts is a separate bid, which I
Right.
would assume, and I won't assume. We're talking about paying for the labor of the engine repair, and that's $12,950. I welcome the solicitor to comment, or I want to respectfully explain why I think it should just focus on just the labor, because it seems like we're going to be doing two different bids for this one bill.
No, the OEM pots are already part of another bid that we've already done, right? And then the other question I have is, they got sales tax on here, $2,100, $2,115 for sales tax. We're tax exempt. We don't pay tax. So is that going to be deducted off the $45,785?
Yes.
Okay. I'm good. That's easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any other discussion from members of the committee? Members of the council? Members of the public? Members of the public? That concludes the consent package for today's meeting. If I may have a motion on the full consent calendar. I apologize.
Motion to,
I have a motion of favorable action.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. The time is 6:28. That concludes the Warwick Finance Committee.
Good evening, everyone. The next committee that will meet is the Ordinance Committee, and that can take place at this time when the chair calls it to order. Thank you.
Acceptance of the minutes from the committee meeting held on March 7, 2022.
Move to accept.
I can't second. I was not present. I can't second the minutes.
She wasn't there either.
Jeremy has moved to accept the minutes from March 7th, 2022. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
And abstain? And next we have PCO 5-22, an ordinance requiring collective bargaining agreement contracts submitted to the city council for ratification to be presented with complete drafts in clean and redlined formats. To be second passage. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Chairman. So we discussed this at length at the previous meeting, but just to circle back on it, essentially what this is going to do is it's going to give us a clean copy of the current contract along with the proposed changes, additions, deletions in, a clear and delineated fashion, which is going to make things a lot easier for us to go through, review, as well as the taxpayers. And having said that, I would respectfully request favorable action. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Any questions or comments from members of the council? Any questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, we can entertain a motion.
Move favorable action.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye. That appears to conclude ordinance at 6:33 PM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next committee that is going to meet is the Intergovernmental Committee, and that is also able to take place at this time.
So intergovernmental will convene at 6:34 PM. First, we have acceptance of the minutes for the March 21st, 2022 meeting.
I have a question though. Can I move that since I wasn't here for that meeting? Council President?
I make the motion for, to approve the minutes.
Second, motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then Councilman Foley abstains. PCR 158-21, resolution to the General Assembly requesting amendment of the Warwick City Charter to establish new elected term lengths and term limits for mayoral and council elective terms beginning January 2025. This is Councilman McElroy. Obviously, he's not in attendance. Council President McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Councilman McElroy unfortunately could not be here this evening, but he did ask if we would consider this evening.
All right. First is an initial disclaimer. If there are any amendments, my preference at least is going to be to handle all those on the full floor as opposed to handling them in committee, especially because of the rather small committee we have today. And less a disclaimer, more an opinion. Personally, my own desire would be 4-year terms for the city council, just to put us in conformity with the school committee and with hopefully what the mayor will be. But other than that, do any members of the committee have any questions or comments?
I just want to say the same thing you just said, that I would look at a 4-year term when we get to the floor and ask for amendments.
Any questions or comments from members of the council? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll hold my comments until it does come to the floor, but at this time, based upon your comments, Chair, I would absolutely support that amendment of 4-year terms. Yes, for the members of the council as well, with across the term limit. Thank you.
Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. I suppose first I'll state, perhaps for reasons that will become more clear as I continue, that I'm not so sure that I do support 4-year terms. I wouldn't necessarily roll them out, but I do think that looking at the principles of democracy here in this, that is a small d democracy, in this Republican form of government, small r Republican form of government, that when we take a look at the congressional level, federal level, Members of Congress are elected every 2 years. That's a legislative body. At the General Assembly at the state level, representatives and senators are elected for 2-year terms. And I think that the 2-year terms help us be closer to the voters and more accountable to them. I can certainly understand the rationale for 4-year terms, and I will say that 2 years goes by very quickly, but I'm not so certain that I could support the 4-year terms. However, that's something where I will keep an open mind as to the logic of my presented by my colleagues, and so on that point I am persuadable. On the term limits themselves, I've never been in favor of legislative term limits, and there are 2 main reasons why. First, we have to look first at the principles of democracies and Republican forms of government. These really go back all the way to ancient Greece, not to give a whole history lesson there, but really a takeaway here is that elections are a decision of the people. Term limits are taking away power from the people to decide who their representative should be. We effectively have term limits now every 2 years. The people get to decide one way or the other every 2 years who represents them. Now, going back to the Roman Republic, there have been distinctions between limits on the executive branch and limits on the legislative branch, and for good reasons. In modern times, the executive branch has consolidated power into one person, effectively. And perhaps that's a bit of an oversimplification, but at the federal level, it's the president. State level, the governor. City level, the mayor. The legislature, on the other hand, is divided, and we are not even allowed to talk with each other to the extent that we might create a quorum or a rolling quorum. So, because I spoke with one of the members on the committee on this, I am prevented outside of this meeting from even discussing my concerns with another member of the committee, the remaining 2 members of the committee, that is. Let's see. And next, another distinction is that the legislative branch relies on its more experienced members to give guidance to the newer members, as there is most definitely a learning curve for new members, and the institutional knowledge of the more experienced members is a tremendous asset for all members to perform our jobs here on the City Council. And we cannot rely too heavily on the executive branch when a key part of our job is to be a check on the executive branch. Think about this more practically. Where would we be, especially the 4 of us, now 3, who were elected as freshmen in that election of 2016? Where would the 4 of us have been without the ability to learn from our more experienced colleagues? Then, at that time, Donna Travis, Steve Marola, Joe Solomon, Joe Gallucci, and Ed Lattiser. 4 out of 5 of those members wouldn't have been there for us if we had the term limits as proposed, and we'd have been far worse off for it. Here, we're piling Pilia on OSA for what? I think that we all know that the City Council has less actual power than the school committee, yet this resolution doesn't even propose term limits for the school committee. There are incredible differences between the 2 branches of government, legislative and executive. In Warwick, the branches are anything but balanced or co-equal. And the reason I bring this up is because the concern about power is central to the arguments for term limits. If there are other arguments for term limits, then I would be happy to hear those arguments. But let's take a look at this as a matter of power and the desire to limit the consolidation of power. So my next, along those lines, the legislature has a very limited role in city government, especially in Warwick, and we on the legislature basically have three main powers. The first, and probably the most important, is as a check on the executive. For example, the legislative branch sets the tax rate. But we do not have much meaningful control over the budget beyond that. The executive has the ability to transfer between line items and otherwise achieve its objectives through initiating only those bids that it desires to initiate and not initiating those it chooses not to. It can use Section 56.6 and the like to avoid the need to seek pre-approval from the city council where the circumstances are such that that would be applicable. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's simply pointing out that the city council has limited powers in that regard as well. For that matter, we've often seen past administrations, the executive can refuse to pay bills that it does not desire to pay. And then as to those vendors, well, now it's their problem. It's not a power that the city council can, the city council has no power to force the executive branch to write a check. That just becomes the problem of the vendor who's seeking to get paid. The city council can ratify contracts by an up or down vote, but it does not have the ability to change any of those contracts by line item, and it does not have the ability to negotiate contracts. The city council can pass resolutions and ordinances, but the city council does not have any power to enforce those. I think that we've all seen many, many instances where various ordinances are not followed or enforced, and for that matter, even things as basic as traffic enforcement, the city council has incredibly limited power. We can't direct police to necessarily enforce traffic on one street or another at one time or another. We do have the night program, which allots a certain amount of funding for certain enforcement, but that again is a function of the executive, as well it should be. The city council has the power to hire and fire only 2 employees, while the mayor has the power to hire and fire, I'm not even certain of the exact count, but I think it's somewhere around 100. The city council has 0 formal powers to block the mayor's selection of whom the city hires or fires, or how that person's compensation is set. And we saw an example of that in 2017.
Councilman Ricks, you have 2 minutes left.
Thank you. I'll try to hurry. I would state that the committee also has the power to expand on the 10-minute limit to allow me to finish my comments. However, if it does not, I suppose that's another demonstration of how little power the city council members actually have. Second, the city council has investigatory powers, but not actual power to sanction or punish based on those investigations. And third, the city council has soft powers for advocating for constituents. This is a very important part of the job, but let's not confuse that with having actual formal powers of government. Most of the time, we can ask the executive branch nicely, and things tend to get done. But we have no ability to order city employees to do anything beyond the powers that all members of the public have under the city charter, ordinances, and Rhode Island state law. I had to advocate for years to get a simple fence replaced. We had, and I sponsored a city council resolution, which was passed unanimously to make some improvements to a local park in Ward 2, but it has been ignored by multiple administrations for years. Resolutions for various items, including, well, I won't get into the details there, but various resolutions are non-binding by their nature, And even if we request to meet with a department head, various administrations can refuse to set up those meetings, and that has happened to me with previous administrations. I remember Councilman Lattiser speaking of the need to fulfill constituent requests. In a previous administration, Councilman Lattiser once felt the need to docket a resolution to get a pothole filled. That's something that really shouldn't be necessary, but it goes to demonstrate the point that the city council does not even have a formal power to ask a city employee to get a pothole filled that employee must actually obey, nor does the council as a whole have the power to pass a binding resolution to get a pothole filled. That's, again, entirely an executive function.
Councilman Ricks, your time is up. Do
Very
any
well.
other members of the council wish to speak on this bill? Do any members of the public wish to speak on this?
Thank you. My name is Jane Austin, 26 Narragansett Bay Avenue, Warwick, Rhode Island. I would like to speak on two aspects of this. I do believe that it is a good idea to increase the term for the mayor, the executive branch, for the reasons that have been cited here before. The executive branch and getting into that position makes sense. And the issue of term limits in general, I'm not a fan of term limits. I think you do lose institutional memory. In legislatures across the country where they have done this kind of thing, the shift has been, it's shifted powers away actually from the legislators to their staffs and to those who are able to kind of stay longer term. It's not necessarily going to happen the same way here because you don't have a big staff, but it's an open question as to where the power is going to shift as a result of that. I think that the competitive elections with more and clearer information on the process for running, better information on the timing is what would get you kind of a stronger legislature. In terms of the office of the mayor, I believe that even if you are considering two term limits, 2 terms is too short. And it's also shorter than the 10 years that this bill has in place if you do 5 terms for council members. So you're rebalancing in a way, potentially, the power between the mayor and the council here in a way that I don't think necessarily serves the city. I would just finally point out that I think the city has been well served by some of its mayors with long tenure and members of long tenure. 20 years ago, I looked over and Donna Travis was in that seat and she played a big role. Councilman Joseph Gallucci was also an important force and a member with institutional memory, both in terms of school committee issues and over 20 years later when it came to the Sewer Review Commission. So I think the loss of institutional memory and just the ability of someone who doesn't necessarily have ambitions for higher office, but wants to be a servant of the city, is something that you should sacrifice that you should not sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Austin. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on this? Seeing none, I would move can I move to send this to the floor without putting a positive or negative recommendation?
Yes, you can send it to the floor with no recommendation, if that's a motion you'd like to make.
Yes, it is. So I'd like to move this to go to the floor with no recommendation. Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That'll conclude intergovernmental at 6:52 p.m.
The next committee will be the Appointments Committee, and that is in order to start now.
Good evening. The time is now 6:53, and the Appointments Committee comes to order. First up is the acceptance of the minutes from March 7th. Do I have a motion?
Move favorable action.
And I'll second that. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. We have one appointment here before us this evening. It's to the Library Board of Trustees, Mary Johnson. I believe Mary is present. In your packet, you will find Mary's appointment, or Miss Johnson's appointment paperwork, as well as a biography, and she comes highly recommended from the library for her dedication and commitment to that organization thus far. And so I will give you an opportunity in a moment to make a brief statement. I'll just see if my colleagues on the committee have anything to add.
Thank you. And if I am reading the street address correctly, I believe that Ms. Johnson is from Ward 1.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would certainly first defer to Councilman Foley.
I recommend Ms. Johnson to the board. She came highly recommended, and she seems enthusiastic about serving, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. And I would just add that based on that recommendation, a quick review of your resume, all indications are that you are highly qualified, and I look forward to voting in favor of your appointment. I would also just briefly add that the City Council only has authority to appoint members of the public to two committees, the Library Board of Trustees and the Land Trust. And so I do want to make sure to underscore that this is an important appointment for the City Council, especially as the Library Board of Trustees is handling, ultimately responsible for one of, I think, the most important services in our city that are used by so many of our residents of all ages. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Anything to add?
Oh, he said it best, especially based on her resume.
Absolutely. Okay. Any members of the committee? Anything to add? Council, sorry. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to commend you, Ms. Johnson, first of all, on your willingness to serve. It's not always easy to have people who are willing to step up and volunteer their time and energies to serve on these various boards and commissions. So it's always refreshing for us to see people doing so. I also must comment on your resume. You have a very impressive and extensive resume. And I think this is a real good fit for you, for the library, and for the city. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Council President McAllister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to say thank you very much. This is a very important board. It's a busy board, and it does a lot. So I just want to thank you. Also mention that it's Library Week, so perfect timing for to have this appointment here. And I'm going to be docketing something this evening regarding the library and their funding at the state level. So we're going to keep the Library Week theme going this evening. So thank you very much for your willingness to serve our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Johnson, if you'd like to say anything, you're welcome to.
Sure. Just thank you for the warm welcome. I think it's on my resume. I served previously on the library board, took a little bit of a break because we weren't sure we were going to stay in Warwick, but we've decided to stay in Warwick. So happy to be reappointed. I think library services are critical, both at the main branch and in the community branches, especially during the pandemic. Even the opportunity just to have access to Wi-Fi was helpful to a lot of people, as we all tried to keep our jobs going and meet our obligations, often from our houses or from places that weren't our usual customary places of work. And certainly during my original stint with the board, have seen a lot of services at the library very tuned in to the community, and am really honored to have that opportunity to continue to serve on the library board. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. Do any other members of the public wish to provide comment? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move favorable action.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome to the library board. Again.
Thank you.
Time is now 6:59 and the appointments committee is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We do have one more committee that needs to take place. However, I am going to ask if we could pause committees. We do have a special guests that are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and it is a school night, so we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll go right back into the committees unless there's objection from my colleagues. So we're just going to start the council meeting in 2 minutes. Just let the clerk and the solicitors get settled, and we will start the council meeting. And we're going to have our guests lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we will return to committees. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I call the City Council meeting for April 4th, 2022 to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister.
Here.
Mr. Foley. Mr. Gephardt.
Here.
Mr. Howe.
Here.
Mr. Lattiser.
Here.
Mr. McElroy. Mr. Ricks.
Here.
Mr. Sinapi. Ms. Travis.
Here.
8 present.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. At this time, I'd like to call on Councilman Lattiser, who's going to introduce our special guests who are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then after the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll have a small presentation. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this evening, we're here to welcome our 5 members of the Scouts that are with us tonight. They're leaders as well. And if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and once you've completed that, we'll go over to the presentations. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the balls bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much. Councilman Lattiser.
Perfect. Well, welcome to the City Council chambers. It's really a pleasure to have you here. And I owe you guys an apology because I was unable to make your ceremonies where you crossed over. I think in the 10 years that I've been on the council, it's the first event that I was not able to attend. So I wanted to publicly give you an apology for not being there. But I'm particularly excited that you're all here tonight, and so well deserved. Scouting is such an important part of who we are as a city, who we are as a state, and who we are as a country. The skills that you learn in scouting, not everyone maybe recognizes to the level of those skills that you attain, from leadership to communication, to working together as a team, team efforts, to all of those things that you do leading up to hopefully someday when you get to that epitome of position, which is Eagle Scout. I've had the pleasure of attending numerous Eagle Scout ceremonies, and it's truly an honor, and it's certainly something that I hope you all keep in mind as a goal as you continue to accomplish and receive all your merit badges. So kudos to all of you, to your scout leaders, to your parents, to your families, and everyone that has supported you to get to this position today. And thank you for what you bring to us as a city. I'm going to read these resolutions of congratulations into the record, and I'll list all of the individual names reading one. Thing you got to do when you get white hair and old is you need glasses to see. Bear 1 minute. It's okay to laugh at that. You know, that was all right. It's okay. Who said they're not old? She did? Nope. He threw you under the bus. You're the man. So we have resolution of congratulations. Resolve that whereas the Boy Scouts of America is a vital force in the development of our youth through its many programs, which encourage the ability of its members to do things for themselves and especially for others. And whereas one of the major objectives in scouting is to develop citizenship through community involvement. And in addition to working for citizenship merit badges, Scouts are encouraged to participate in community service projects. And whereas Jonathan Nadalillo, Abby Netch, Alex Gemmer, Garrett Kinder, and Billy Mulcahy, and the City Council appreciates and recognizes the activities and contributions that you've all made to our community. Whereas, therefore, we recognize all of these individuals as worthy of this highest honor and encourage them to continue their commitments to excellence. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor, the Warwick City Council wish to congratulate all of you for this outstanding accomplishment and extend to each of you our deepest appreciation for all of your dedicated work and wishing you all the best in all of your future endeavors. The clerk has directed a copy of this resolution to each of you. This resolution takes effect upon passage. And once again, on behalf of the mayor, all of the administration, members of the city council, and all of the residents here in the city of Warwick, congratulations on a job well done. Thank you very much. Patty, would you like to say a word or two? Sorry? Good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations again. Next up is general communications. I do have two. First, I just want to make a note. I know the mayor has been speaking about this. I know we are all dealing with it on garbage, the sanitation pickup. Please leave your bins out. If they didn't get it to it on your regular day, we will get to it. They are working extremely hard I also want to note that you are allowed to put out your trash without putting out your recycling. So if you don't have a full recycling bin, you no longer have to put it out for your trash to be picked up. But please, thank you for your patience. As you know, we've purchased a number of new trucks. We're working on new shifts. We are trying our best to make sure that we get to your trash and recycling in a speedy and an effective manner as possible. So please, if you're recycling or your trash is not picked up on your normal night, please leave it out and we will get to it the next day. And if it doesn't come to the next day, call your council person, call the administration, and we will send out a truck for you. The second note I just would like to mention is anybody that is having any difficulties paying heating bill or utilities bills. There's a number of programs that are out there. Rhode Island Housing has a program, and also right here in our backyard, West Bay Community Action also has a program that is available to Warwick residents. So if your income was affected by COVID on any level, there is a program that'll help with your heating bills and your utilities. So please reach out to West Bay Community Action if you need assistance in these two areas. At this time, are there other members of the council that would have anything under general communications? Councilwoman Travis.
Yes, Mr. President, I got two. The first one I got is just to notify the council and to let people know that this weekend is the Ocean State Grand National Tournament that we hold every year at the Crown Plaza. And just the Crown Plaza, I know we got other hotels too. We got over like 550 rooms booked already. So that, just to show the people that are coming that will be spending money in our stores, in our gas station, in our restaurants. So it's going to be a big weekend. So happy about that. The next one is a sad moment. I like to ask for a moment of silence when we get to it for Gary Kodavar. Gary Kodavar was one of our CSO officers. He was the president of the FOPA. He was vice president of the Citizens Police Academy and very active in the Norwood Association. He also was one of the people last year when we first started doing the Pledge of Allegiance. He did the Pledge of Allegiance for us. Gary passed away. His funeral was this morning. He was 62 years old. I'd like to ask for a moment's silence. He was a close friend.
Absolutely. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Anyone else have anything under general communications? Councilman Gephardt.
I just wanted to make mention that last, I guess it was Monday, was 401 Gives Day, organized by United Way. Many Warwick-based nonprofits participated. The day as a whole, statewide, raised over $3 million. For 500 different organizations, but several of which, the president mentioned West Bay Community Action participated, Warwick Center for the Arts, House of Hope, Vows. So there are a number of Warwick-based organizations represented, and it's a really strong commitment to nonprofit and to putting funds back into the community. So. I thought it was worth mentioning. Keep that on your calendar for next year. It's always a good day to give money to these organizations because not only do you get the impact of your own funds, but throughout the day, various organizations like the Rhode Island Foundation or the Pepito Opportunity Connection will match funds. So you can really double or triple your impact for the dollars that you have to give. So I'd also say that any nonprofit community organization that hasn't participated before, it's very easy to get involved and get your name on here. It gives you more exposure for your organization. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gephardt. Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. I also will be seeking and requesting a moment of silence for a Ward 3 resident, Gerald Sabatelli Sr. Mr. Sabatelli was a U.S. Army veteran, served 16 months in Germany in the late 60s. Immediately upon returning, he married his love, Patricia. Today would have been their 52nd wedding anniversary. They were the parents of 3, Gerald Jr., Brenda, Jennifer, and he was the proud grandfather of 5 grandsons. One reason Mr. Sabatelli was the coach for many years with the Warwick West Side Little League. So once again, another legend, great man within a great person within our city who selfishly, like the guests, the adults with our guests and our guests here today, service to others, put service to others over the over his not just for his family but for his community. So I respectfully ask for a moment of silence for Mr. Gerald Sabatelli Sr.
Absolutely. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Anything else from council members under general communications? One added note from mine, West Bay, not only they help you with your heating, your utilities, but also rent assistance. So if you're having trouble with your rent assistance, feel free to reach out to West Bay Community Action. Okay, at this time, I'm going to pause the council meeting. We need to return. We have one more committee this evening, which is the Ward Reappropriations Committee. So I ask that we pause the council meeting. We will return to committee meetings, and then after that, we'll return to the full council meeting. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I call the Ward Reappropriation Committee to order. It is now 7:21. I'm looking for a motion to the acceptance of the minutes for the March 15th meeting.
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up, we have one item on the agenda this evening, and that is PCR 36-22, a resolution regarding reappropriation of the wards based upon a recent census. We do have the director of the Board of Canvassers here, and also our consultant who helped draft these new maps. And if you look on the website this evening, you can see Exhibit A lists the boundaries for all the different wards that was set before. This is the second public hearing on this, and this committee will make a recommendation to the full city council after that. So I'm going to ask the consultant to come in to the mic and introduce himself. I think we just want to go over kind of the basics, which wards needed to grow, which wards needed to shrink, and we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Council President. I do apologize. I am kind of have a fever and sore throat, so I think I'm hopefully going to be able to hear me because I'm not going to be talking too loud. As I showed the council and the board of canvassers when the census data came out, and once the state had drawn its House and Senate, it looked like there was a necessary change between Ward 3 and Ward 8. Ward 3, with the loss of the population south of the airport expansion, was underpopulated and did need to grow. And Ward 8 was overpopulated when we looked at all the population. This is, for wards, it is total population from the census. And I introduced that as a line that needed to be looked at to make a viable ward proposal. And we also looked at how the current ward lines meshed with the past state House and state Senate lines, and then as representing some places where the ward lines would help out the board of canvassers and election day operations if they meshed by shifting a few blocks. And I also introduced how by making improvements in the census block boundaries, we were going to be able to do a better job of keeping neighborhoods whole within wards if we shifted some lines to account for new wards, such as at Weathersfield Commons. So we had some good meetings. We presented it to the public, and there was an article in the Warwick Beacon on it, and I look forward to being able to answer any specific questions about the plan.
Thank you very much, sir. Again, we broke it down for us on which wards needed to kind of grow a little, which wards needed to shrink a little bit. We had a public hearing on this. The maps have been available. The information has been available to the public. I just want to make sure everyone knew that this is the second meeting on this. At this time, does the committee have any questions? Okay, is anyone on the council have any questions? Any members of the public have any questions? Any members of the public have any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a recommendation.
So I'm not thrilled I'm losing spots. I understand and it's actually the right thing to do, especially in regards to Weathersfield. Now that we'll actually have equal representation rather than splitting it down the middle in an odd way. So I'll move to accept the report as presented and to pass the resolution.
As favorable action. And I'll second that favorable action. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, Director. That concludes the Ward Reappropriation Committee at 7:25. We will now go back to the full City Council meeting. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are now back into the full City Council meeting. If you're just joining us, we had a roll call. We've done the Pledge of Allegiance, which we had some outstanding guests that led us in that. We had general communications. So now we're moving on to A under on the first page of the agenda, acceptance of the minutes for the council meeting held on March 21st. Do I have a motion? Councilman Lattiser? Second by Councilman Howe and Councilman Foley. We can do a voice vote on that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes passed. Next up is number 1 this evening is appointments requiring confirmation. Library Board of Trustees, committee report appointments.
Should I have abstained from that vote since I was not here?
The last council meeting? Yes.
And I should not have seconded it. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilman Howe also seconded it, so we're okay on that. And let the record show that Councilman Foley abstained on the last vote on the minutes. Okay, Councilman Gephardt for the committee report on the Library Board of Trustees.
On Ms. Johnson's appointment, the committee recommends favorable action.
I believe that's Ward 1 for action, Councilman Foley.
I ask for favorable action.
Second by Councilman Howe, Councilman Lattiser, Councilwoman Travis. Any questions on this appointee that was not asked earlier this evening in committee? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes. Appointment passes.
Appointment passes. Thank you very much. Number 2 this evening is the consent calendar, PCR 37-22, resolution relative to bids. Committee report, finance.
Favorable action.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley, Councilman Gephardt, Councilman Lattiser. Go ahead, Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bid 2022-392, radio infrastructure improvement. Bid 2022-310, purchase paratransit van. Bid 2022-080, workstations, laptops, tablets, printers, copiers, computer peripherals. Bid 2021-093, maintenance contract for Xerox multifunction copiers and HP LaserJet printers. Bid 2022-348, Stalker Dual SL Dual Zone Multi-Directional K-band radar system. Bid 2022-342, OEM motor parts for Mercury Marine Motors. Bid 2022-338, rotary 2-post auto lift. Bid 2022-344, purchase of 60 horsepower marine outboard motor. Bid 2022-357, maintenance contract for latent laptops and tablets. Bid 2022-185, less lethal shotgun ammunition. Bid 2022-393, structural collapse specialist training. Bid 2022-189, heating oil. Bid 2022-388, grinding services. Bid 2022-349, purchase Skyjack 26-foot electric scissor lift. Bid 2022-009, Bravo, spring repairs and related work. And bid 2022-397, labor for engine repair, R Romeo Sierra 70. That concludes the consent calendar, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairman Howe. Are there any questions from members of the council that were not asked during the Finance Committee earlier this evening? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the consent calendar.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes. Consent passes.
Thank you, the consent calendar passes. Councilman Howe, I believe 2 items were removed from the consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President. Item number 1 is formally bid 2022-339, Fire Department promotional exams. That is now PCR 39-29, and that was hold until April 18th.
Okay, we will hold that to April 18th.
The second item, Mr. President, was formally bid 2022-391, repairs to Fire Utility 2. That is now PCR 40-22. It was motion to withdraw per request of the department.
Okay, so I need a motion, a motion to withdraw this from Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action on motion to withdraw.
Second by Councilman Lattiser, Councilwoman Travis, and Councilman Gephardt. Okay, so the motion is to withdraw. A favorable vote is to withdraw this bid. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, the clerk will call a roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 8 yes to withdraw.
Thank you very much. The motion has been withdrawn. Next up, we're under unfinished business. First up is PCO 5-22. This is for second passage, committee report ordinance.
Committee recommends favorable action.
For action, Councilman Lattiser.
Move favorable action on PCO 5-22.
Second by Councilman Foley. Councilman Gephardt. Any questions on PCO 5-22 that were not asked during committee? Again, this is for second passage. Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Yes. Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi?
Yes.
Ms. Travis? Yes. 8 yes, motion passes.
Thank you for second passage. The motion passes. We're now moving on to new business. First up is PCR 158-21. This is committee report intergovernmental.
Committee move this to the floor without a recommendation.
Okay, for being able to move this forward, we need a motion for favorable action. We'll get a second, and then we will open it up for discussion. Councilman Lattiser, do you have a
Move
motion?
favorable action on PCR 158-21.
Second by Councilman Gephardt. Okay, I do want to give the administration the ability to speak on this. So I know that Chief of Staff is here. Chief, you may want to use that one.
If there are many arguments both in favor and in opposition to what is proposed in this resolution to the General Assembly. So on behalf of the administration, I just want to be very clear that the mayor does support increasing the term for the mayor's office from 2 years to 4 years. And the administration is also in favor of limiting that to 2 4-year terms. With respect to Warwick City Council members, the administration is in favor of limiting the term to 5 consecutive 2-year terms. I think this is, consistent with what some of the other communities in Rhode Island are doing. Cranston, for example, the mayor is term limited to consecutive terms. In Providence, we have also seen that mayor is term limited, and the council members in Cranston also have term limits. So I do think that there are, again, you'll hear a lot of arguments in favor and in opposition to both, and there definitely are, persuasive arguments to be made. But I want to be very clear that the mayor does believe that 4-year terms for the mayor's office is really important and something that this council should consider, and that term limits for council members to 5 consecutive 2-year terms also important for the council to consider.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Are there any members of the council that would like to speak on this item? Councilman Snappy.
So I want to get this on the table so we can figure out if we want to actually do it or not. So I'll just move it now. I'd like to move to amend to change the terms for the council people to 4 years and to change the limitation from 5 consecutive 2-year terms to 3 consecutive 4-year terms.
Okay, so we're just going to do that one more time here so we can get the amendment. If you could just, we'll have Solicitor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. As it was discussed in committee and as we now see a motion to amend before us, we will have to review full documents. So if we can get a summary of the item first, as was just done by Councilman Sinapi, we would then look for a second on the proposal. We can discuss and go from there. And if there's subsequent amendments, we'll follow the same process. So just to be clear, Councilman Sinapi, the recommendation that you just had was to, in all appropriate places, amend the council term from being 2 years to be 4 years with limits of, was it 3 terms?
Yes, 3 consecutive 4-year terms.
Okay, so is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilman Lattiser. Okay, any discussion on the amendment, Councilman Sinapi?
So the main reason is to bring this, have parity from for the mayor and for school committee. Part of it actually goes to what Councilman Ricks was saying as far as the power dynamics. I don't want a situation where the mayor can just kind of wait out council members and that way kind of switch the balance. Like, oh, look, a council I don't agree with, that's okay. I just have to wait 2 years and they're all gone anyway, or some of them anyway. And same with school committee. I want to make sure it's even across the board. I can't count the number of constituents that have expressed dismay or concern or just aggravation that the term limits, or that the terms rather, are only 2 years and that school committee is double. I also have lost track of the number that have expressed issue with no limitations. I mean, you need look no further than Congress to see why you need limitations. There's many reasons why it doesn't work, but one of the reasons is they can be there literally forever, or at least until they die in their chair. And it doesn't really work for me, especially the longer they're there, the worse they usually get. And for what we've seen in Warwick, at least with the prior administration, well, I say prior, many administrations ago at this point, when we had someone in there for too long in the executive seat, things started to fall by the wayside for one reason or another. And so I very much am a fan of the limitations, both from the perspective of the mayor, but also for the city council, because I don't want to enable or encourage people to stop being invested in the role in which they were elected to be. But I'm happy to discuss it and happy to see what everyone else's thoughts are on it.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Councilman Sinapi has brought up a lot of very good points. And I agree with the Chief of Staff and the Mayor's position on the 2 concurrent terms for Mayor. I also agree with Councilman Sinapi and have been a proponent of this for quite some time, to change the terms for the city council from 2 years to 4 years. The mayor makes a very good point with the rationale for the 4-year terms, and I absolutely have that same feelings for 4 years on the city council. I'm going to take the liberty of speaking for all of us on my next comment with regard to the 2-year to 4-year. I remember when I first got elected, there was some discussion on this. I think it was in my first term. And there was a comment made that this person thought the election every 2 years was good because it gets you out there again in front of your constituents. I don't think there's any member on this city council that needs an election cycle to be out there with their constituents. The members of this council have been extremely hardworking in their wards, from attending just about every event that happens, as an example, in Councilwoman Travis's ward, to Councilman Ricks, walking, I don't know, 100,000 steps in 2.5 days, you know, whatever it was. And all of us doing that. I know, speaking personally, I don't need an election cycle to motivate me to get out there and do what I need to do. I don't need campaign signs out there every 2 years. I don't need to be banging on people's doors every 2 years. I sure don't relish the thought of doing fundraisers to raise the funds that are necessary to campaign every 2 years. As a matter of fact, that's probably the least favorite part of my job, is having fundraisers. Unfortunately, because we have this election cycle every 2 years, that becomes an important part of what we do and how we do it. We all know how expensive it is to do the mailings. And to segue a bit with that, a lot of these mailings, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of them just end up in the trash. And it's just another item that has to be recycled. And it just creates a whole host of nuisances that I don't think the very people that go to the polls appreciate. I do believe that the majority of the people that I represent don't particularly relish the thought of the campaign cycle every 2 years. They do very much appreciate the fact that they know, at least a good portion of them know, who their council person is, because we are so actively involved in our community. Especially important to me with this 2-year to 4-year transition is I want to have all of the time possible to be able to engage with my constituents, to be able to chase down all of the things that they need to have taken care of, to be able to focus on getting the job done that they elected me to do. And that doesn't entail, in my opinion, it doesn't include having to be out there campaigning for 5 or 6 months every 2 years. I would rather spend my time during those 5 or 6 months fighting the fights that my constituents can't fight, or don't know how to fight, or don't have the time to fight, which is why they elected me to sit in that seat. The 3-term limit for the 4-year, I think it's appropriate. I didn't always feel that way. Truth be told, when this conversation came up early on in my career on the city council, there was some councilmen that made some very good points, such as Councilman Solomon, Councilman Marola, made very good points that we do have term limits. We're termed out every 2 years on the election cycle. There's some truth to that, certainly, and it did present an issue to me that I had to revisit. The first year in office, as you all know, we're consumed. We're totally consumed with the process. What's a PCO? What's a PCR? You know, how does all this work? How do the mechanisms work? Who are the department heads? Establishing your communication levels with all of the different department heads, with all the bargaining groups, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't something that is done very easily in your first or second year in office. It's not easily done in your first or second term in office. When we first get elected, you're super excited, you're super motivated, you have all of these plans and all of these goals that you want to accomplish. And it's not always possible to accomplish them in 2 years because, as we all know, government is an extremely burdensome process to get anything done. It just takes a lot of time. I am very happy to support this resolution, this amendment to this resolution. And I certainly hope that this is something we'll be able to pass this evening, in addition to the amendment, but also to the full resolution, so that at the end of 12 years on the city council, that's a long time to accomplish what it is that you need to accomplish. And it also will afford an opportunity for someone else to sit in this seat and take on the challenges that perhaps one reason or another you weren't able to do, you didn't have time to do, or you didn't want to do. It is very true that all of us sitting in this room today, we have absolutely turned to former Council President Solomon, Council President Marola, Councilman Galucci, Council President Galucci, to Councilwoman Travis. Absolutely. We have turned to them. That doesn't mean because there's a new person sitting in this seat of Ward 5 can't reach out to me for advice, as I reached out to people that served here before and after I got here, and before and after they were here. So for all of those reasons, I'm really excited about the possibility of changing this term thing from 2 to 4. The General Assembly, they're free to do whatever they please. We don't have any control over what the General Assembly does, nor should they control what we do. And I don't believe they make any attempts to do so. In Washington, they can change from 2-year to 4-year if they feel that's what they want to do. That doesn't mean because they have 2-year terms, it doesn't mean that it's right. As we sit here in the city of Warwick, at this moment in time, it appears as though it's right for them. That doesn't preclude me from making the decision as to how I personally feel, and I personally would welcome the opportunity to have 4 years to do the work, the due diligence, the battles, and everything else that comes along with this position, as opposed to spending 1 year and 5 or 6 months and then having to go on the campaign trail and let some of these other things that are very, very important go by the wayside. So for all those reasons, Mr. President, members of the council, I am really happy to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Travis.
Yes, thank you. Ed said everything I wanted to say, but I can't hit him to keep him quiet. But the fact of the matter is, 4 years would be so much better than 2 years. And the 2 years is so hard because, I mean, when you first come on, you're campaigning, you're all excited. That's all you have to do is campaign. You get into it, like you said, it's a learning experience. You start before you know it, you're just getting the nitty of it. Now you got to campaign again. So it's just like nonstop. But I mean, I never thought I would be here as long as I have. But if I haven't been out into the ward, in the streets, and the events that I was in, and even when I lost to Councilman Foley, those people come back and they said, "You're coming back," and I was going to end it right there, but they all came out like in gangs. "You're going to run again. You're going to run again." I said, "No, I don't think so." "Oh no, you're going to run again." And they were that happy with me that they wanted me to come back, and I felt kind of, well, I'll try. When I came back, I mean, they're there for me because I'm there for them. And as long as you do your work, but I don't disagree with, 4 years for 3 terms, fine. And then just tell everybody, sayonara, goodbye, it's time to go. And that's fine. But the 4 years is so important compared to the 2 years. But like Joe Solomon and Marola said, every 2 years, if they don't like you, they'll just get rid of you. That's your term limit right there. If you do your job, well, they'll put you back. But like, I have no problem with 4 years. I think that'd be great for anybody else. So new people coming in, I think it's good. And if the term limit is for 12 years, that's fine. Like I said, just goodbye. And that's, I think it's good. I wish the sponsor was here so he could say what he had to say, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gephardt.
So I'll speak specifically to the amendment at this point. Generally, I'm not opposed to term limits. When I think about some of the arguments for extending the term for the council, parity with the mayor, parity with the school committee, when you read through this resolution, it talks about how having term limits would, create this rotation of, new blood into the council and create more opportunities for more members of the community to get involved and to run for these seats. And I think that's all good. I personally am more in favor of keeping 2-year terms for the council members. When you think about the difference between a race for the council and a race, say, for mayor or for school committee, they're very different in terms of their scope. If you're an at-large school committee member, you're running a citywide campaign, which is an incredibly sizable endeavor compared to 1/9 of the city, which is what we all run for, and the same for the mayor. Or if you're even a district school committee member, you're running a race that's triple the size of ours. So if anything, I'd like to see those maybe be shorter terms or something, but the magnitude of what those other races entails is more significant, in my opinion. I like the opportunity to get out and pushes you out into the community. We get limited participation in these meetings, but certainly by being out there in the community, you're having more conversations, you're getting more input, you're making sure that people know who you are and what you stand for and what you plan to work on in the next couple of years. The mayor has to build an administration. He or she needs to hire the right people and put a plan together and start to work on a budget. We just asked for a 5-year financial plan. And so it certainly makes sense, for somebody who's going to get the opportunity to put a plan in place to get 4 years to enact it. I don't see the need for this body to have longer terms. I think things are good with the length that they're at now, and I'm not opposed to limiting them to the number of consecutive terms. One just thing I'll mention is, like, you think about, often people run for a city council or position like that because of something topical or something that they want to get done or something that's motivated them. And I mean, just look back at the beginning of this term that we're in right now and how different the world is and how different the city is and how much has changed. A lot changes over the course of 4 years. And I personally, my opinion is that 2 years is a good opportunity to get out there. I certainly don't think 2 years is enough to really, have your feet under you to really know everything. But I do think it's a good opportunity to get back out into the community, build more support, and come back and do more work if that's what the voters choose. So that's where I'm at.
Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I got to tell you, I think all my colleagues made some great points tonight. And I know that when Councilman McElroy first proposed it, I was really, kind of like, okay, yeah, fine. And then the more I thought about it, the more I talked to people. So I'm just going to speak from a personal, as an elected person, on the amendment of 4 years. I look at it from outside the walls of this chamber as a citizen. I like the 2-year set. I think Councilman Gebhardt put it in a great description when he goes, "You're representing 1/9 of the city." I get phone calls at all times. I'll go a week without a phone call, and then I'll get 7 phone calls in an hour. And it always happens when I'm, at work and I can't answer the phone, it seems, but I'll get 7 phone calls in 1 hour. And then, of course, I do my constituency. I get out there. I can actually say I've already received a phone call from a gentleman who currently is in Ward 9 and wanted to call and talk to me and let me know where he stood on a few things because he read in the newspaper that he was going to possibly go into Ward 3. So he called and found out. So personally, going to and conveniently, how nice that would be, a 4-year term, you don't have to campaign. And I say this not disregarding what people have said, but for me as a citizen, this is not my life, this is not my career, this is my service to my city. I prefer 2-year terms. And I do believe what the councilwoman, the former council president, Travis said, which is the voters, if they don't like you, they'll get rid of you. And that's the best. That is democracy in a republic, smaller. That is the best description. It is the voters who will get rid of you. So I just want everyone to understand where I'm coming from is that we are 1/9 of a city, which was a great description, Councilman Gebhardt. We are out there every day getting the phone calls, sending the emails, making the requests. We are earning our keep, if you will. And in between there's the campaigning. And I'll be the first to say, can't like you, Councilman Lattiser, the campaigning, the politics, the part of it, I'm not 100% a fan of, but I have to point out also Councilman Ricks, who walked 100,000 miles and just to throw up at my door. No, he walked 500 miles and he'd walk 500 more, but he's out there knocking on the doors, meeting the people, talking to them, and that's what we do. And because we're such we have the uniqueness of being a council and a public service of the people in a community. We're not in Washington. We don't fly out. We don't have to go to the State House. We stay in our community. We represent. We are literally a knock on the door. As a matter of fact, my recyclables, Mr. President, were picked up 2 days late. And one of my neighbors didn't get the memo, knocked on my door and said, "Hey, what's going on with the recyclables?" And I said, "Oh, just give it until tomorrow." He said, "Oh, okay." Turned around, we talked for a bit. He left. I loved it. He's a neighbor of mine, no problem. That's what I like about this. And so I see it as the way that it works now. If I go to a 4-year term, it would be convenient, but I do like the 2-year term where I feel it keeps me, I don't want to say I wouldn't be engaged, but as a voter outside these chambers, I want my council person engaged. I want my council person to be vested and fully vested. So speaking just on the amendment, I would have to say that I would like to stick with the 2-year term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Howe. Councilman Ricks.
Speaking just on the amendment, I'll save my comments for the rest of it for afterwards. But strictly on the amendment, it's my understanding that the amendment would have no change as to the mayor's term. I just want to make sure on that the amendment compared to the original proposed legislation would involve 2 4-year terms for the mayor being possible before the term limit kicks in, and that is not changed by the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. In the time that we've had, I've been able to redline the amendment, and I can read what the new language proposed would look like if that's of interest to everyone. It's the same type of repetition for both the be it resolved clause, so I'll read specifically on lines 18 to 24 of page 2, which is the question that would appear on the ballot. The language would now read, for elective terms commencing January 2025, shall the term of office for mayor be increased from 2 to 4 years, with service as mayor limited to 2 consecutive 4-year terms, exclusive of service prior to January 25, and any partial term of less than 2 years, comma. So I'm going to pause there. No change to that front half. The next section is where the amendment would come into effect, and it would now read, and shall the term of office for service on the city council be increased from 2 to 4 years with a limit on service of 3 consecutive 4-year terms, exclusive of service prior to January 2025, and any partial terms of less than 2 years. So it would be changing the council provisions from the term being now 4 years instead of 2, and a limit of 3 consecutive 4-year terms, exclusive of your prior service from when it goes into effect if ratified by the voters, as well as increasing the partial term standard to be half of the term of office. So that would be the amendment that is on the table that's been moved and seconded and debated.
Thank you. And let's see, was there any change or addition of language as to the school committee?
There is no, the school committee is not part of this resolution in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. That's what I thought. And one other clarifying question as to the term limits. I noticed in both the original language and the amended language that it refers to consecutive terms. Would that prevent someone from doing what, say, Councilman Galucci did in serving non-consecutive terms over numerous decades?
Thank you. The language that was brought here by Councilman McElroy was a modified version of similar language that has passed in Cranston, as well as the amendment appears to model more of what is in place in Providence. The partial term or the non-consecutive feature is one that is consistent in those things. So that origination is because we've seen it done in other places. And so using the same structure that's been in place to say that the limit is on consecutive service exclusive of prior and partial terms is what has been accomplished in other jurisdictions in the state. And that's the, the origin of the language.
Okay, so someone could take a break for a term and then seek re-election after that?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, so that does make some sense to me. And let's see, I do, on balance, support the amendment because while I tend to support the 2-year terms over the 4-year terms, if we are having terms that are off cycle, some of this was already stated by Councilman Lattiser, that we don't want a situation where the mayor can, with serving a 4-year term, can simply wait out a set of city council members for a couple of years until the new set comes in after the elections. But I'm also thinking that, well, the founding fathers, when they were setting the math, the terms for Congress and the presidency, they found that balance between the 2 years in the House, 4 years for the president, 6 years for the Senate, all as a matter of checks and balances. We learn about all of this back in elementary school, of course, but some of it is relevant here today because if we set up a system where the mayor has 4-year terms and the council has 2-year terms, then that not only raises the concerns that Councilman Lattiser raised, but also raises concerns as to the mayor having then greater ability to influence the election of city council members during those years that those half of election cycles that the mayor is not up for re-election, but the entire city council is. And that would tend to weaken the city council, the legislative branch, as to what I would say is our most important function, providing a check against the executive branch, which is far, far more powerful than the legislative branch here in the city of Warwick. So for those reasons, on balance, although I'm not particularly enthusiastic about this piece of legislation, as you can tell from my earlier remarks, I would be willing to support that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have a few comments. I do not support the amendment. I believe the city council should be a 2-year term. I think everyone made a lot of excellent points on this. I just personally, I believe the legislative branch, just like at the State House, just like in Congress, every 2 years, I think it keeps you sharp, keeps you going. I also agree with the statement that we've always had term limits, because every time your name is on the ballot, you could be out. So my personal opinion, I support what was originally drafted, which is 2-year terms for 5 consecutive years. I would support term limits for city council, but I at this time I do not support changing to a 4-year term for city council, which is what is being discussed right now on this amendment. So I believe everyone had a chance to speak on this. So why don't we have the clerk will call the roll. It's been moved and seconded. So this is on the amendment to change the term. It would be 4-year terms for the city council for 3 consecutive terms. Correct? Thank you. So the clerk will call the roll. So a yes vote is to support the amendment. A no vote is not to support the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
Yes.
4-4.
So we have a 4-4 tie here, so the motion fails.
That's why we should have waited for the sponsor.
Is there any other amendments anyone would like to make at this time? Or we also have that option if Councilwoman Travis,
Sorry?
we have that option as well. We could always hold and wait until we have full
Yeah, we
body.
could hold it. I think we should, I think the sponsor should have been here, if you don't feel good, that's fine. But he should have been here to present it, to give his thought on it. I think we should hold it. And I just want to add that I did all my time on 2 years. Okay? All of them. The point I was trying to get over was, it also took me 20 years to get my little danger bridge fixed, because for a lot of reasons, but determination, it finally got done, and with the city helping and everything. But that was my point. You have 4 years to get a lot more stuff done. Sure, you're going to still be dealing with your constituents. But I did get here with the 2 years, every 2 years. Okay? But I think we should make a motion to hold.
So Councilwoman Travis has a motion to hold. Do you have a date? Next meeting?
Yes.
Next meeting?
Second.
Second by Councilman Lattiser. Councilman Foley?
Second.
Second by Councilman Foley. We'll do a roll call vote on that since we had a lot of discussion. Any questions or comments on the motion? Councilman Howe?
Just for the record, Mr. President, I would like to say that Councilman McElroy did say he wouldn't mind seeing this discussed this evening and put forward to the body. So I just wanted to put that on record. I agree. He could be here, but he said he didn't mind it being discussed and put forward. Thank you.
Yes, and we won't give up any HIPAA things, but it was nothing under the control of Councilman McElroy, who found out this morning that he couldn't attend. So I just also want to say that. Councilman Foley.
Wanted to state that if this was an absence like mine where I was out of state, that would be different, but he's sick and physically cannot be here. I think out of deference to him, that is why I made the second, to hold till he's here, especially when it's a deciding vote one way or another on his resolution.
So the motion is to hold until the April 18th. The clerk will call the roll. Favorable action would be to hold this.
Ms. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes to hold.
Thank you. The motion will be held until the next meeting. Next up on the agenda this evening is PCR 36-22. This was a resolution regarding the reappointment of the wards based upon the recent census. If Councilman Sinapi, as a committeeman, can you make a recommendation on that?
The committee recommended favorable action.
For action, Councilman Sinapi?
I move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Lattiser, Councilman Howe. Any questions or comments on this proposal this evening? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. Ricks? Yes. Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 8 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Okay, at this time, we are going to go into executive session. Solicitor Walsh is going to walk us through how we do that. But for the members of the public that are here and members of the public that are watching at home, we are going to go into executive session where we're going to leave this council chambers. We're going to go downstairs to a meeting room where we are going to discuss 2 items that are in executive session. Then we will come back into the general meeting and the solicitor will walk us through coming back. So if you're watching at home live, the council meeting is not over. We're just moving into executive session and Solicitor Walsh will lay that out, the process.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing we would need is a motion to convene into executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws, Section 4246-5A2, regarding pending and potential litigation, those items being national opioid litigation and another item on Guess Inc. So we would need a motion and a second and a roll call vote to proceed into executive session accordingly.
Councilman Lattiser wants to make the motion to move to executive session, second by Councilwoman Travis, Councilman Gephardt. Okay, any questions to move into executive session? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll to move into executive session.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 8 yes to move to executive.
Thank you. We are now in executive session and we will return once that is completed. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to have the solicitor, Mr. Walsh, lead us back into session.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. We are now back in open session. The only vote taken during the closed session was a motion to return to open session, which was passed unanimously with one absent and one was recused at that moment, and the clerk has that information. And so the first action we would need to take is a motion to seal the executive session minutes.
Councilwoman Travis. Second by Councilman Lattiser, Councilman Gephardt. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll to close the minutes.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi?
You were there for one portion of the meeting, and as such, this is an action on sealing the minutes, not on the merits of any item under debate. But if you wish to abstain, it's an option.
Going to abstain? Is that it?
Yep.
And Ms. Travis? 7 yes, 1 abstention.
Okay, the motion passes.
So we're back in council. We're back in council now, and I think we're.
Okay, yes, so we are back in the full council meeting now. We are under executive communications. There are no other executive communications. So next up, I'm going to ask the council if they would like to consider something under unanimous consent. So this would be PCR 38-22, a resolution authorizing the mayor by and through the Warwick Retirement Board to enter into a contingency fee legal retainer for an investigation and possible litigation regarding the breach of judiciary duties by Guess Inc. Is there any objection to hearing this item at this time under unanimous consent? No, that's a roll call vote. We're going to do a roll call vote on that. So if the clerk will call the roll for, do I have to have a motion in a second? Okay, for unanimous consent, the clerk will call the roll to hear this at this time under unanimous consent.
Ms. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks? Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 8 yes, under unanimous.
Okay, we can now hear this item under unanimous consent. Councilwoman Travis, would you like to move PCR 38-22 for us?
I move favorable action on PCR-38-22.
A second by Councilman Lattiser and Councilman Howe and Councilman Foley. Any questions or discussion on PCR 38-22 from for council members? Any questions or comments from the members of the public on PCR 38-22? Any questions from members of the public? Okay. Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action on PCR 38-22.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Ward 1, anything under unanimous consent to docket? Ward 2? Ward 3? Pass. Ward 5?
Under unanimous consent?
Unanimous
Nothing.
consent.
No.
Ward 6?
Pass.
Ward 7 passes. Ward 8? Ward 9?
Pass.
Councilwoman Travis?
If there be no further business of this honorable body, I move to a docket session.
All those in favor of moving to docket session? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ward 1, anything to docket this evening? Ward 2? Ward 3?
Yes, Mr. President, a resolution requesting the city of Warwick support the installation of the Luso American Veterans Monument at the Rhode Island Veterans Memorial Cemetery.
Intergovernmental.
Thank you.
Ward 5, anything to docket?
Yes, I have an ordinance. It's an ordinance in regard to no parking one side of the road from Crawford down to the end of Narragansett Bay Avenue to the water access point, and it is accompanied by a traffic study.
Ordinance Committee. Ward 6.
Pass.
Ward 7, I have one, and happy to take on any co-sponsors. It's a resolution, tentative title, a resolution to the General Assembly requesting additional FY 2023 state budget appropriations for libraries. This has been a request from our library as it affects the more state money that comes in, the more programs that they can do. So are there any, I would like to docket that first, and we'll see if I can get any co-sponsors. Looks like we got around the horn co-sponsors on that, and intergovernmental will place that. Thank you to my colleagues for joining. Ward 8, anything to docket?
Just one resolution requesting the General Assembly switch to market-based valuations.
Intergovernmental. Ward 9. Pass. And no more business before the City Council. Everybody have a great evening.
Ciao.